Ever wonder what happens when the most powerful man in the room meets the one person he can't control? What if a single touch could unravel a billionaire's world? What secret does a runaway masseuse carry that leaves him restless, obsessed, and ready to burn everything down? From a penthouse massage to a remote pregnancy, from high society scandal to a fight for love. This is a story of obsession, defiance, and a love that cost a fortune. If you're ready for a dramatic, glamorous, and emotional Nigerian tale, stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating stories that will keep you hitting that notification bell. The lobby of the Diamond Estates whispered of quiet, obscene wealth. The air was chilled, carrying a faint, clean scent of lemongrass and marble. Lola had just the strap of her heavy leather kit bag, her palms damp against the grain. The bag, a gift from her late mother, felt like an anchor today. The agency manager's stern words buzzed in her ear. "Mr. Obiagu is a platinum-tier client, Lola. Do not speak unless necessary. Your hands are to do the talking. And for heaven's sake, don't gawk." As if she could help it. The elevator, a silent capsule of polished brass and dark wood, soared to the penthouse. With a soft chime, the doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into his living space. Lola's breath hitched. It was the epitome of modern Nigerian elegance. A vast, open-plan realm where the fierce Lagos sun was tempered by floor-to-ceiling windows treated to a golden hue. The floors were a sleek, dark Irako wood polished to a mirror shine. Against one wall stood a monumental artwork, a contemporary twist on the classic Uli design, in stark black and cream. Plush, low-slung sofas in deep indigo were accented with pillows made from vibrant Adire and Aquite fabrics in coral and ochre. A towering, sculptural wooden figure from the Benin Kingdom stood sentinel in a corner, lit by a discreet spotlight. But her eyes were drawn to the subtle Christmas touches. A magnificent, minimalist tree fashioned from twisted driftwood and decorated with hand-painted gourds and strings of delicate white cowrie shells. A wreath of fragrant olive branches and white anthurium flowers hung on the panoramic window. "You are the therapist from Zenith Touch?" His voice was deeper than it had been on the phone, a smooth baritone that seemed to vibrate from the walls themselves. He emerged from a shadowed corridor, and Lola's professional composure wavered. Kelechi Obiagu was younger than she'd imagined for a man of his reported fortune, and his presence was a physical force. Dressed in simple black linen trousers and a fitted white t-shirt, he was all lean muscle and quiet command. His eyes, the color of dark roast coffee, scanned her with a detached efficiency that made her feel appraised, categorized. "Yes, sir. Lola." From Zenith, she managed, her voice thankfully steady. He gave a curt nod. "The room is this way." He led her to a dedicated wellness space, even more serene than the living area. A state-of-the-art massage table stood in the center, layered with plush white linens. The air hummed with a subtle, calming frequency. A large, framed photograph of the serene Zuma rock at dusk dominated one wall, a stark contrast to the urban jungle outside. Here, the Christmas decor was a single, beautiful Eichna figurine wrapped in a tiny garland of olive leaves, a nod to heritage and season. "I have a chronic tension across my shoulders and lower back. The others, they treat the symptom, not the root." He said it without looking at her, already shrugging off his shirt and lying face down on the table with the unself-conscious ease of someone used to being served. "The others, the licensed massage therapists, the chiropractors, the physios." Lola understood. She set up her oils, eucalyptus, lemongrass, a base of warm coconut. She washed her hands in the adjacent basin, the warm water steadying her. Her first contact was deliberate, professional. She mapped the terrain of his back, the formidable breadth, the corded muscle, the shocking knots of granite-like stress lodged near his scapula. She began to work, her fingers firm, seeking not just the muscle but the locked energy beneath. A low groan escaped him, a sound of profound relief that seemed to surprise him as much as her. She adjusted her pressure, her touch becoming more intuitive, guided by an innate sense she'd inherited from her grandmother, who had been a traditional healer. She found the hidden rivers of tension and followed them, her thumbs and palms working in slow, deep circles. Minutes blurred. The only sounds were their breathing and the faint, ambient music of a talking drum melody. She felt the exact moment he surrendered, the rigid armor of his body melting under her hands. It was an intimacy deeper than anything she'd ever known, this silent conversation of healing. "Oh," he muttered, his voice muffled by the face cradle. "No one has ever. Your hands are different." She didn't reply, pouring more warm oil, letting her movements flow like a dance. She worked down his spine, unlocking the history of long hours, immense pressure and solitary command held in each vertebra. When she gently instructed him to turn over, the atmosphere had shifted. The room felt charged, warmer. His eyes, now open, watched her as she worked on his shoulders. His gaze was no longer detached. It was focused, intense, a live wire humming between them. She was massaging his temples, her fingers lightly brushing his hairline, when it happened. The connection, the raw, unfiltered humanity of the moment, overflowed. His hand came up, capturing her wrist. His eyes searched hers, finding not a servant, but the source of his sudden, profound peace. The world outside, the glittering city, the silent Christmas decorations, all of it fell away. "What have you done to me?" he whispered, more a statement than a question. And then he pulled her down and kissed her. It was not gentle. It was a claim, a release, a desperate seeking of the solace her touch had promised. And Lola, whose world had been one of quiet service and cautious survival, was utterly swept away by the tsunami of him. The careful boundaries of client and therapist, of billionaire and masseuse, vaporized. It happened on the padded floor, amidst the spilled bottles of essential oils that filled the air with a dizzying, sacred perfume. There was pain, a sharp, shocking rupture of her old life. There was pleasure, a terrifying, glorious climb she hadn't known existed. And through it all, his eyes held hers, anchoring her in the storm. Afterward, he fell into a deep, untroubled sleep, one arm thrown possessively across her. In the dim light, the tiny olive leaves on the Eichner figurine seemed to shimmer. Reality crashed back in, cold and brutal. What had she done? She, Lola Ease, had just lost her virginity to her client. Her billionaire client. This was a fire that would consume her, her job, her dignity. With trembling, oil-slick hands, she disentangled herself. She dressed in the dark, her clothes feeling like a stranger's skin. She glanced back once. He looked younger in sleep, the ruthless CEO stripped away, leaving just a man. The sight pierced her heart even as it fueled her panic. She fled. Out of the serene room, past the magnificent silent tree, into the brass elevator, and through the opulent, sleeping lobby. She ran until the sound of her own frantic heartbeat was louder than the memory of his voice. In her small, quiet Eichjaw flat, stripped of any Christmas cheer, the tears came. They were tears of shock, of shame, of a seismic loss. But as she scrubbed his scent from her skin, she knew with a terrifying clarity that she was also crying for something else, for the profound connection she had felt, the unsettling peace she had seen on his face, the world that had been glimpsed and then violently snatched away. And as she cried, miles away in his sky-high sanctuary, Kenichi Obiagu awoke to an empty space beside him, the lingering ghost of eucalyptus and lemongrass, and a restlessness that would soon eclipse every deal, every ambition he had ever known. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of curated calm, became a cage of echoing silence. The minimalist Christmas decorations, the driftwood tree, the olive wreath, now seemed like stark, mocking sculptures. The scent of her, that unique blend of warm coconut and sharp eucalyptus, haunted every room, a ghost he couldn't exorcise. Ken stood at the window, a crystal tumbler of untouched bourbon in his hand, watching the Lagos dawn bleed orange over the lagoon. His body felt strangely alien. The chronic tension in his shoulders was gone, erased by her miraculous hands, but in its place was a deeper, more profound ache, a hollow restlessness centered in his chest. He had wrenched himself from sleep, his arm instinctively reaching for a warmth that wasn't there. The memory was visceral, hyper-real, the shock of surrender in her dark eyes, the soft gasp that was both pain and wonder against his lips, the feel of her trembling under him. It hadn't been a conquest. It had been a collapse. Of his control, of his world order. And she had vanished. His first call to the number on the agency's invoice went straight to voicemail. Her recorded voice, professional and sweet, was a fresh torture. "You've reached Lola of Zenith Touch. Please leave a message. Lola. It's Kenichi Obiagu. Call me." He sounded curt like the CEO he was. He called again an hour later. "Lola. Please. We need to talk." The desperation seeped through. By the fifth call, which she also rejected, a cold fury had begun to mix with the desperation. Who was she to walk out? To reduce him to this? This persistent, unwanted ghost in her phone? At the Obiagu Holdings headquarters, the festive cheer of the office felt like an insult. The towering white Christmas tree adorned with gold and coral beads in the lobby was just background noise. His assistant, Neka, noticed immediately. "Sir, you're 9 a.m. with the Singapore investors. Reschedule. The board memo on the Port Harcourt acquisition. Later." He sat in his leather chair, but he was mentally back on the padded floor of his wellness room, tracing the patterns of light from the Lagos skyline on her skin. He couldn't focus on a single spreadsheet. The numbers blurred. All he could see was the vulnerable curve of her neck as she worked, the concentrated furrow in her brow. His distraction became a spectacle. Amara arrived first, a vision in a designer dress the color of champagne, carrying a small gift box of imported truffles. She was a lawyer from an old money family, their relationship a comfortable, strategic understanding of mutual benefit. "Darling, you've been quiet," she said, leaning to kiss his cheek. He flinched, the gesture feeling alien. Her perfume, a heavy, expensive floral, clashed violently with the phantom scent of lemongrass in his memory. "I'm busy, Amara." "Too busy for me," she pouted, a well-practiced move. It left him cold. He gave monosyllabic answers, his gaze drifting back to his dark phone screen. She left, confused and displeased. Chinello came in the afternoon, fiery and direct, a top-tier fashion entrepreneur. "Ken, what is this? Amara says you've become a ghost." She perched on the edge of his desk, a familiar intimacy that now felt like an intrusion. "Not now, Chinello. Is it the deal, the pressure?" She reached out to massage his shoulder, the very shoulder Lola had unknotted. He stood up abruptly, evading her touch. "I said not now." The hurt and anger in her eyes were palpable. "Fine. Be like that." Their worried text to each other later that night would seed the first whispers of scandal. "Something's wrong with Ken. It's not business. It's a woman." For 2 weeks he was a man possessed. He bullied the agency, Zenith Touch, with a ferocity he usually reserved for corporate rivals. At first, they cited client-therapist confidentiality. A donation to their operational fund, a number that would make their manager's eyes water, suddenly refreshed their memory. They gave him an address not in Lagos, but in a quiet, unassuming town in Enugu State. A grandmother's house. He took his private jet to Enugu, then a rugged SUV down roads that grew progressively quieter. The urban jungle of Lagos gave way to lush green and red earth. The contrast to his world was absolute. He found her on the simple veranda of a modest bungalow, wrapped in a faded pink shawl. She was staring into the middle distance, one hand resting lightly on her abdomen. She looked paler, more fragile, yet there was a new, quiet gravity about her. When she saw him, her eyes widened in pure shock, then fear. She made to stand, to flee again, but he was quicker, standing at the bottom of the veranda steps, blocking the path. "Why did you run?" The question tore out of him, raw and stripped of all his billionaire polish. For a long moment she said nothing. The sounds of the countryside, distant birds, the rustle of leaves, filled the tense silence. Her defiance, when it came, was quiet but steel-clad. "You know why? It was a mistake. I was overwhelmed. And you were my client." "It wasn't a mistake," he said, the conviction in his voice startling them both. He took a step closer, his eyes dropping to her hand, still splayed protectively over her stomach. A terrible, wonderful suspicion dawned, a hope so fierce it was painful. "Lola, tell me." Tears welled in her eyes, then, spilling over. She looked away, her voice a whisper. "I'm pregnant." The world tilted on its axis. The restlessness, the ache, the obsession. It all crystallized into a single blazing point of purpose. The hollow in his chest filled with a protectiveness so savage it stole his breath. A smile, the first genuine one in 2 weeks, broke across his face. He climbed the steps slowly as if approaching a skittish forest creature. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her, his joy an undeniable force. "I will take care of you," he vowed, his voice low and fervent. "Both of you. I promise you that. No more running." He saw the conflict in her eyes. The fear, the residual hurt, but also a flicker of desperate hope. She had run from the billionaire in his penthouse. But here, on her grandmother's veranda, he was just a man, promising everything. And for the first time since she fled, Lola felt the tight coil of panic in her belly begin, just slightly, to unwind. He didn't ask. He simply began, with a quiet, unstoppable determination that mirrored the flow of the Niger. The next morning, a sleek, armored SUV with Lagos plates was parked outside the bungalow, a discreet driver named Ibrahim waiting. Ken's phone had buzzed with urgent calls from his office all night. He had silenced them. "Pack what is precious to you," he told Lola, his voice leaving no room for refusal. "Not furniture. Memories." Her grandmother, a small, sharp-eyed woman with skin like folded parchment, watched from the doorway. She had said little the previous evening, only observing Ken with an ancient, knowing gaze. Now she pressed a small, carved itchy bracelet into Lola's hand. A man's spirit is known in the storm, not the sunshine, she murmured in Igbo. Let us see his spirit. She gave Ken a slow nod, a provisional blessing. The return to Lagos was a journey between worlds. Lola watched the green blur back into a metallic gray sprawl, her hand unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach. Ken didn't bombard her with words. He sat beside her, working on a tablet, but his attention was a tangible warmth beside her. He was giving her space within his presence. He did not take her to a hotel or a separate apartment. He brought her directly back to the Diamond Estates penthouse. The staff, the housekeeper, Beezy, and the chef, Tund, assembled in the living room, their expressions carefully neutral. This is Ms. Lola Ease, Ken announced, his arm a light, proprietary bar at her back. She will be living here. Her comfort and security are your primary concern. She speaks for me. Beezy's eyes, sharp with years of domestic politics, flickered over Lola's simple dress and the old kit bag she clung to. A tiny, almost imperceptible tightening at the corner of her mouth. The jealousy was instant, a silent vibration in the air-conditioned air. Ken saw it. His voice cooled by 10 degrees. Is that understood? Yes, sir, they chorused, dispersing. He then began what Lola could only describe as a gentle, systematic remaking of her world. He took her to the boutiques of Victoria Island, not the intimidating, hushed European ateliers, but to the studios of celebrated Nigerian designers. He didn't dictate. He watched. This one, Lola said, her fingers brushing a soft, modern-style wrapper set in a deep indigo with a subtle gold thread pattern. Well, take it in every color it comes in, Ken told the delighted attendant. At a high-end maternity store, he was endlessly patient, insisting she try on elegant dresses that flowed like water. He sat outside the changing room, scrolling through his phone, but looking up every time the curtain swished, his gaze softening each time. The real test came that evening. I'm hungry, he said. Not for Tund's lobster. For something real. He took her to a famed suya spot under the bridge in Ikoyi. The billionaire in his crisp white shirt and tailored trousers sat on a plastic stool beside her, ordering mounds of spicy, smoky meat with extra yaji and sliced onions. He watched, captivated, as she closed her eyes in bliss at the first bite, a faint sheen of sweat appearing on her temples. He reached out, wiping a tiny smudge of spice from the corner of her mouth with his thumb. The gesture was so intimate, so domestic, that a group of young men at the next table whistled. Ken just grinned, a rare, unguarded sight, and threw a wad of naira at them. Celebrate with us. The next day was the beach at Elagushi. He rented a private section, a canopy shielding her from the December sun. They walked at the water's edge, the Atlantic foaming around their feet. He told her about building his first company from a cyber cafe, the betrayals, the victories. She spoke of her mother, her grandmother's remedies, the quiet dream she'd had of opening a small wellness studio. He listened as if it were a boardroom strategy. Back at the penthouse, the domestic Cold War simmered. Beezy would forget to plump the Adair pillows Lola liked on the sofa. Tund would make jollof rice with a fierceness of pepper he knew Ken didn't prefer, but Lola did. The Christmas tree with its cowrie shells and gourds seemed to watch it all. Then Amara and Chinello arrived, unannounced and united in their outrage. They swept in, a hurricane of designer bags and fury. Ken, what is the meaning of this? Amara demanded, her eyes slicing over Lola, who was curled on the sofa with a book on prenatal care. We hear you've installed some. Therapist, Chinello sneered, the word dripping with venom. Lola shrank back, but Ken moved. He stood between them and her, his posture transforming from the relaxed man at the beach to the formidable CEO. Lola is not a therapist in the way you mean it, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. She is the mother of my child, and she is under my protection. You will address her with respect or you will leave. Amara gasped. Your child? Ken, have you lost your mind? This is a scandal waiting to explode. It is my life, he fired back. And my choice. The door is there. Their exit was glacial, their silence more threatening than their words. The scandal broke 2 days later. The blog headlines were brutal. Obiagus pregnant Masseuse. Billionaire CEO trades elite for maternity ward drama. Board in panic as love triangle sours stock. The board meeting was a tribunal. The long Irako table was a battlefield. Share prices had dipped. The chairman, an elderly man who had known Ken's father, leaned forward. Kenichi, this is untenable. The optics are a disaster. We are not asking you to abandon the young woman. We are suggesting a discreet settlement. A trust fund for the child, a comfortable residence for her abroad until things quiet down. Preserve the company's image. All eyes were on Ken. He steepled his fingers, looking at the faces of the men who had cheered his most ruthless deals. Then he stood. "You misunderstand," he said, his voice echoing in the sleek room. "Lola Ease is not a problem to be settled. She is my future. That child is my heir. This company was built on my vision, my risk. And my vision now includes them. If the board's faith in my judgment is so fragile it can be broken by society gossip, then perhaps we have a deeper issue." He picked up his tablet. "I will not be paying anyone off. I will be marrying her. The board can choose to stand with me, or it can accept my resignation and watch what happens to your shares when I walk." He left them in stunned silence. He didn't go to the office. He went home, to the penthouse, to her. Lola was waiting, having seen the headlines, her face pale with anxiety. "What happened?" she whispered. He pulled her to him, his chin resting on her head. He could smell the coconut oil in her hair. "I chose you," he said simply. "I will always choose you." For the first time, Lola fully leaned into his embrace, the last wall around her heart crumbling. The war outside was just beginning, but in the quiet of the penthouse, with the Christmas lights twinkling against the gathering dusk, they had found their fortress. The silence in the penthouse after the board meeting was profound, a fragile bubble of peace in a city sharpening its knives. Ken's defiance had been a shock, a circuit breaker that left Lagos society momentarily speechless. But quiet never lasts. It began with a single, sleek envelope, hand-delivered to the penthouse concierge. No stamp, no return address. Inside, on expensive linen paper, was a grainy yet unmistakable photograph. Lola, looking pale and frightened, stepping out of her grandmother's house in Enugu, with Ken's SUV visible in the background. Scrawled beneath in elegant, threatening script were the words, "Every kingdom has its price. Even yours." Then the phone call started. Not to Ken, but to Lola's private line, a number only a handful of people had. Heavy breathing, then a click. A distorted voice whispering, "He can't protect you at the clinic, little bird." Ken's fury was a silent storm. He doubled her security, a shadow team of ex-special forces now trailing her every move. But the threats were like smoke, impossible to grasp. The board's discreet settlement now felt like a polite precursor to something far darker, far more personal. Lola, trying to nest in her new home, found a tiny, twisted Otank charm, a symbol of enmity, tucked under the mattress of the nursery they'd just begun to decorate. Someone inside the penthouse had placed it there. The domestic staff's polite masks now seemed like terrifying blanks. The greatest blow came not from an enemy, but from within Lola's own body. A sudden sharp pain. A rush of fear. A frantic, midnight drive to the private hospital, Ken's face ashen under the sterile lights. The doctor's words were careful, measured. "The twins are fine for now. But the stress. It's a significant risk. She must have absolute calm, Mr. Obiagu. Absolute security." Ken stood in the dim hospital corridor, the weight of his entire world, his love, his unborn children, pressing down on him. He had built an empire on control, but now unseen forces were tightening a noose around the one thing he couldn't afford to lose. He had promised to protect her. But how do you fight an enemy hiding in the shadows, someone who knows your movements, your staff, your deepest fears? He knew one thing with crystalline certainty. This was no longer just a scandal. This was a war. And the next move would have to be his. A move so definitive, so public, it would either end the threats forever, or ignite the final, catastrophic attack. Who is sending the threats? Can Ken identify the enemy within his own home before it's too late? Will the pressure prove too much for Lola and the twins? The stakes have never been higher. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next explosive chapter of this dramatic love story. What would you do in Ken's position? Let us know in the comments below.